Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into medieval Europe, where death walks every street, and you're about to become one of history's most misunderstood heroes. You're a plague doctor, and honestly, you probably won't live to see next Christmas. But hey, at least you'll look mysteriously cool doing it. Picture this, it's 1348, the Black Death has just arrived in your city, and someone thought we need people in bird costumes to fight this thing. Spoiler alert, the bird costume doesn't actually work, but we'll get to that delightful revelation later. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment letting me know what city you're listening from, and what time it is where you are. I love knowing you're out there, wherever there might be. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're sitting in your modest physician's study when a knock echoes through your wooden door. The messenger's face is pale, and his hands shake as he delivers the official summons. The city council has chosen you, among others, to serve as a plague doctor. Your stomach drops because you know exactly what this means. You've heard the stories from other cities where plague doctors lasted maybe 3 months, if they were incredibly lucky. Most don't make it past 6 weeks. But here's the thing about medieval medicine, it's basically just educated guessing with a side of prayer. And when the Black Death is killing 1 in 3 people, educated guessing suddenly becomes the most valuable skill in Europe. You read the letter again, hoping somehow the words will change. They don't. The pay is excellent, which should be your first red flag, because nobody pays well for safe jobs in 1348. The appointment comes with a house, a guaranteed food supply, and enough silver to make your family comfortable for years. Of course, the catch is you probably won't be alive to spend most of it, but medieval economics were never really about the long term anyway. You stare at the official seal, weighing your options, which are basically accept or flee the city entirely. Running means abandoning everything you've built here. Accepting means embracing almost certain death. The next morning, you meet with the city's senior physician, who will train you in exactly 3 days. 3 days to learn how to combat humanity's greatest killer. It's like getting a driver's license for the apocalypse, except the test is whether you die horribly. He shows you the uniform first, because apparently looking terrifying is half the job. The leather coat goes down to your ankles, and it's been treated with wax and aromatics because everyone believes smell causes disease. This theory is completely wrong, but at least you'll die smelling like lavender. Then comes the hat, a wide-brimmed black thing that makes you look like death's accountant. And finally, the mask, that famous beaked monstrosity that will haunt children's nightmares for the next 700 years. The beak isn't just for show, though it certainly achieves that goal spectacularly. Inside, you pack dried herbs, crushed flowers, and spices because the prevailing medical theory is that bad air causes plague. Again, totally wrong, but the herbs do make breathing through leather slightly more pleasant. Your instructor explains that you'll be paid per patient visited, not per patient cured, which is fortunate since you'll be doing precious little of the latter. Most of your job involves documenting who's sick, who's dying, and who's already dead. You're basically a walking census taker for the apocalypse. Real physicians, the ones with actual training and wealthy patients, have mostly fled the city by now. They saw the mortality rates and decided their expertise would be better preserved somewhere plague-free. Smart men, terrible colleagues. So you, with your basic medical knowledge and your willingness to walk into infected houses, become the closest thing to medical care most people will see. It's not inspiring, but it is historically accurate. The city is essentially hiring you to bear witness to catastrophe, to provide some small comfort to the dying, and to maintain the illusion that authority figures have everything under control. Spoiler alert, they absolutely do not. But the pay really is extraordinary because cities desperate enough to hire plague doctors are also desperate enough to pay plague doctor wages. Your weekly salary equals what most craftsmen make in 6 months, which would be exciting if you had more than a few weeks to enjoy it. You wake before dawn, because plague doesn't keep bankers' hours, and begin the ritual of putting on your protective gear. The leather is cold and stiff, and you already know you'll be sweating buckets within an hour, but vanity is a luxury you can no longer afford. The mask goes on last, and suddenly your world becomes a narrow tunnel of vision and muffled sounds. You sound like you're speaking from inside a cave, which adds an appropriately ominous quality to your medical consultations. Your first house call is a merchant's family on the better side of town. The merchant himself answers the door, and you can see the relief in his eyes, because someone official has finally arrived to help his dying wife. You follow him upstairs, where his wife lies in bed, burning with fever and covered in the telltale black swellings that give the plague its cheerful nickname. She's conscious but delirious, asking for her mother who died 20 years ago. You check her pulse, which is racing, examine the buboes, which are horrifying, and consult your limited medical knowledge, which is useless. Then you prescribe bed rest, plenty of fluids, and prayer, because that's literally all anyone knows how to do. The merchant asks if she'll recover, and you give him the answer you've been trained to give, that recovery is in God's hands, but you'll monitor her condition closely. What you don't say is that she'll probably be dead within 3 days, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. Your second patient is a blacksmith's son, maybe 8 years old, who stares at your bird mask with the kind of fascination children reserve for monsters and fairy tale creatures. His fever isn't as high as the merchant's wife, and the swellings under his arms are smaller, which gives you a tiny spark of hope that maybe this one might survive. You mix a poultice of herbs and oils, knowing it probably won't help but needing to do something that looks like medicine. The boy's mother watches your every movement with desperate attention, as if memorizing your technique might somehow save her child. You leave them with instructions for care and a promise to return tomorrow, though privately you wonder if there will be anyone left to visit. By evening, you've seen 12 patients, and you're already developing the emotional calluses that will be essential for survival in this profession. Each house tells the same story: fever, swelling, delirium, and families clinging to hope that your presence represents some chance of salvation. You document everything meticulously, because record-keeping is apparently crucial even during the apocalypse. The walk home takes you through streets that were bustling just weeks ago, but now echo with an eerie emptiness broken only by the occasional sound of weeping from behind closed doors. You pass houses marked with red crosses, the official sign that plague has visited, and residents are either dead or quarantined within. Sleep comes in gentle waves tonight, as we leave you adjusting to your new role as medieval Europe's most fashionably dressed harbinger of doom. Tomorrow, we'll explore how you learn to navigate a city where panic spreads faster than disease, and discover why your bird mask makes you simultaneously the most feared and most sought-after person in town. Your second week as a plague doctor, and the city has become unrecognizable. Streets that once buzzed with merchants and children now echo with your solitary footsteps. The only sounds are church bells tolling for the dead, and the occasional rumble of death carts collecting bodies. You've learned to read the signs of a plague house before you even knock. Doors marked with red crosses, windows sealed shut, and that peculiar silence that hangs over places where hope has died. Sometimes a face appears at an upper window, desperate eyes tracking your approach. The smell hits you first, even through your herb-packed beak. It's not just death, though there's plenty of that. It's fierce sweat and unwashed bodies, and the lingering smoke from fires where people burn everything they think might be contaminated. Which is basically everything. Your leather coat has developed its own geography of stains, and you've stopped trying to clean them. Each mark tells a story. Blood from a burst bubo here, vomit from a delirious patient there. You're becoming a walking testament to human suffering, and honestly, it's starting to affect your appetite. But here's the strange part. People have begun to see you as a kind of dark angel. Your arrival means someone official cares enough to check on them, even if that someone is just you in a bird costume with minimal medical training. You've developed your own superstitions, because when you're surrounded by inexplicable death, ritual becomes a lifeline. You always approach houses from the left, knock exactly 3 times, and never enter a room where flies are buzzing in unusual patterns. None of this has any medical basis whatsoever, but it gives your days structure. And structure is what keeps you sane when you're essentially a professional witness to the apocalypse. Your herb mixture has evolved to less lavender now, more rosemary in time, because you've convinced yourself they provide better protection. They don't, but the act of mixing them each morning has become a meditation on staying alive another day. You've learned to eat before making house calls, because the sights and smells you encounter tend to eliminate appetite for hours afterward. Breakfast becomes a strategic meal, consumed in the pre-dawn darkness before you transform into your leather-clad alter ego. The walking stick isn't just for show either. It keeps people at a safe distance, which is crucial when desperate families want to grab your hands and beg for miracles you can't provide. It also helps you navigate streets increasingly cluttered with abandoned belongings, and the occasional body that hasn't been collected yet. 3 weeks in, and you're beginning to understand the real politics of plague management. It's not about curing anyone, because nobody can cure plague in 1348. It's about maintaining the fiction that authority figures have everything under control. You file daily reports with the city council, documenting house calls, patient conditions, and mortality rates. The council uses these reports to make decisions about quarantine zones and trade restrictions, and which neighborhoods to basically write off entirely. Your job title might be plague doctor, but your actual function is more like pandemic intelligence officer. You're the city's eyes and ears in the infected districts, gathering data so officials can make informed decisions about resource allocation. Which mostly means deciding which areas get medical supplies, such as they are, and which areas get marked as lost causes. Medieval triage is brutally practical, and you're the one providing the information that determines who lives in the sections worth saving. The wealthy merchant's quarter still gets regular visits and medicine and food deliveries. The poor districts get prayers and promises and the occasional barrel of questionable grain. Your reports justify these decisions with clinical language, but the underlying math is simple: save who you can afford to save. By your 4th week, you've developed an almost supernatural ability to predict how long patients have left. It's not mystical, just experience with the disease's progression, but families treat your pronouncements like prophecy. The fever patterns tell you everything. High fever with delirium usually means 3 days, maybe 4 if they're young and strong. The buboes that turn black and start to smell give you maybe 2 days. When patients stop asking for water, you start preparing families for the end. You've learned the diplomatic language of terminal diagnosis. We must prepare for all possibilities means they're dying. The situation is very serious means they'll be dead by morning. We should call for a priest means you're probably too late for even that. The hardest part isn't the dying adults. It's the children who don't understand why the scary bird person keeps visiting. And why everyone around them seems so frightened. You've developed a gentler voice for the young ones, speaking softly through your beak, trying to make your presence less terrifying. Some children think you're a magical creature, part bird, part human, who appears during times of great trouble. This interpretation is more accurate than they realize, though the magic part is definitely oversold. Your dreams have changed completely from normal anxiety nightmares about forgetting to wear pants or showing up to examine the wrong patient. Now you dream about endless rows of beds filled with fever victims, all calling your name in voices that sound like crows. You wake each morning feeling like you've already worked a full day. And in a sense you have, because your subconscious spends the night processing the trauma you witness, filing away the faces and voices of people whose stories ended badly. The isolation is becoming harder to bear than the disease itself. Your friends avoid you, understandably terrified that you carry contagion in your clothes and hair. Your family loves you, but they watch you with the careful attention people reserve for dangerous animals that might turn unpredictable. You eat dinner alone now, not because anyone has asked you to, but because you can see the tension in their faces when you sit down. They try to hide it, but fear is hard to disguise, especially when it's justified. But you've also discovered an unexpected community among the other plague doctors, the few who are still alive. You nod to each other on the streets, sharing the acknowledgement of people who understand what it means to walk through hell for a living. 5 of the original 12 plague doctors have died, 3 from plague itself, 2 from exhaustion and despair. The survivors have formed an informal support network, sharing information about which treatments seem most effective, which neighborhoods are safest to visit, and which signs indicate a patient might actually recover. These conversations happen in whispers in dark alleys, because even among yourselves, hope feels dangerous to express too loudly. You've started keeping a secret journal, separate from your official reports, documenting not just medical observations but human moments that remind you why this work matters. A husband holding his wife's hand through her final hours. A mother singing lullabies to a feverish child. An elderly man sharing his last piece of bread with a neighbor's family. These small acts of love and generosity persist even in the face of cosmic horror, and recording them becomes your way of maintaining faith in humanity's fundamental goodness. The official reports focus on symptoms and mortality rates, but your secret journal captures the courage and compassion that flourish even when death seems to have conquered everything else. Tomorrow brings new horrors, as we follow you deeper into the heart of the epidemic, where you'll learn that the disease itself might not be your greatest enemy after all. The living can be far more dangerous than the dead, and your bird mask is about to make you a target for some very human monsters. Your 6th week as a plague doctor, and you're walking through the market quarter when the first stone hits your shoulder. Not thrown hard enough to injure, but definitely thrown with intent. You turn and see a small crowd gathering, their faces twisted with a mixture of fear and anger you've never seen directed at you before. Someone shouts "Bird of Death," and suddenly you realize the mood in the city has shifted dramatically. You're no longer seen as a helper or even a necessary evil. You've become a symbol of everything that's gone wrong, a walking reminder of how completely the authorities have failed to stop the dying. A woman steps forward, her face gaunt from weeks of poor nutrition, and points an accusatory finger at your leather-clad chest. Her child died last week, despite your visits, despite your herbs and medicines. In her grief-stricken logic, your presence brought death to her door. You try to explain, speaking as gently as possible through your beak, that you don't cause the plague. You only treat it, but grief doesn't listen to reason, and fear doesn't care about medical disclaimers. The crowd grows larger, and their murmur grows more dangerous. Your walking stick becomes a weapon of self-defense as you back away slowly, keeping your movements calm and non-threatening. Running would trigger their chase instinct, and you know with absolute certainty that being caught by an angry mob while wearing a bird costume would not end well for you. The next morning, you find a crude drawing nailed to your front door. It shows a figure in a plague doctor outfit being hanged from a tree, with the words "Death's Servant" scrawled underneath. Your neighbors avoid eye contact as you tear it down, but you can feel their stares burning into your back. Fear has made the city paranoid, and paranoid people need someone to blame. You, with your strange costume and your constant presence at scenes of death, have become the perfect target. It doesn't matter that correlation isn't causation. Frightened people aren't interested in logical fallacies. The city council calls an emergency meeting of all remaining plague doctors. Of the 12 who started, only 7 are still alive, and now they're concerned that civilian hostility might finish off the rest of you before plague gets the chance. The captain of the guard explains the new protocol with military precision. You'll travel in pairs now, with a city guard escort when visiting the most dangerous neighborhoods. This is partly for your protection, but mostly to maintain the illusion that medical services are still functioning normally. What he doesn't say, but you all understand, is that you've become political liabilities. The council needs you to document the crisis and provide the appearance of medical intervention, but they also need you to stay alive long enough to be useful. Dead plague doctors make terrible political theater. You develop new routes through the city, avoiding main streets where crowds might gather, sticking to alleys, and side paths where you can move unnoticed. You've become a medical ninja, which would be more fun if the stakes weren't life and death. Some families still welcome you, especially those who've seen their loved ones actually improve under your care. The few recoveries you've witnessed, probably more due to luck than treatment, have given you a small group of supporters who speak well of your work. These families become your safe houses, places where you can rest and eat and remove your mask for a few precious minutes without fear of recognition. They offer you water and bread, and most importantly, they treat you like a human being rather than a harbinger of doom. You've also discovered an underground network of other essential workers, the gravediggers and body collectors, and priests who still perform last rites. All of you have become pariahs in your own city, necessary but unwanted, like immune systems fighting a disease that everyone would rather ignore. Together, you share information about which neighborhoods are safe, which streets to avoid, and which houses might offer shelter if angry crowds start forming. It's a survival network for people whose job it is to help others survive, which has a certain grim irony that you're too tired to fully appreciate. It happens on a Tuesday evening, just after sunset. You're returning from a particularly difficult house call, where you watched a father die while his young children pleaded with you to save him. You're emotionally drained, and not paying enough attention to your surroundings when the mob appears from 3 different directions, cutting off your escape routes with the precision of people who've been planning this encounter. They're not the desperate, grief-stricken families you've been dealing with. These are opportunists looking for someone to blame, and you're wearing a target on your back. Their leader demands that you remove the mask, a butcher whose shop has been closed for weeks due to lack of customers. He wants to see the face of the devil who brought death to their city. Your mind races through options, but running is impossible. They've surrounded you completely. Fighting is suicide. You're outnumbered 15-1. Reasoning with them might work, but angry mobs aren't known for their listening skills. You choose the unexpected option. Instead of removing your mask, you pull out your medical journal and begin reading aloud the names of people you've treated, people who've recovered, families you've helped through their darkest hours. Your voice carries clearly through the leather beak, naming neighbors they know, children they've watched grow up. The recitation of names begins to break their anger, because each name represents a story they know, a person they care about. You're not just the faceless bird of death anymore. You're the person who held their neighbor's hand while he died, who brought medicine to their friend's sick daughter. The mob disperses slowly, confusion replacing rage as they realize their target has a human face behind the mask. But the message is clear: your days of walking openly through the city are over. You've become too recognizable, too much of a lightning rod for the community's fear and anger to continue operating in daylight. You adapt because adaptation is what plague doctors do. Your house calls now happen before dawn or after dark, when the streets are empty and your distinctive silhouette won't attract attention. You become a creature of shadows, fitting for someone whose job involves so much death. The city council provides you with a different route each day, plan to avoid areas where hostility is highest, and to maximize the number of patients you can see without triggering incidents. Your medical practice has become a military operation, complete with intelligence reports and evacuation plans. Your family moves to a different house, one not associated with your profession, where they can live without the stigma of being related to the city's most visible reminder of the plague. It's safer for them, but it means you're now truly alone, even when you're not wearing the mask. The isolation is complete, but somehow this makes you more effective at your job. Without the distraction of normal human relationships, you can focus entirely on the work of documenting catastrophe and providing what little comfort you can to the dying. As tonight's shadows lengthen around you, we leave you learning to navigate a world where helping people has made you their enemy, where your calling to heal has transformed you into a symbol of everything people fear most. Tomorrow, we'll discover how you find ways to continue your work when the entire city wants you gone, and learn the dark arts of medieval medical survival. 2 months into your plague doctor career, and you've mastered the art of medical invisibility. You know every back alley, every abandoned building, every secret passage that connects one district to another. The city has become your maze, and you're the minotaur everyone fears to encounter. Your new schedule begins at 3 in the morning, when even the most dedicated insomniacs are finally asleep. You slip through streets like smoke, visiting the houses marked on your secret list, checking on patients who've requested your help through coded messages left in predetermined locations. The messaging system developed naturally, born from necessity when direct contact became impossible. A white cloth hanging from a specific window means someone inside needs medical attention. A chalk mark on a door indicates the number of sick family members. An arrangement of stones in a courtyard tells you how urgent the situation is. You've become fluent in the language of desperation, reading signals that the healthy population doesn't even notice. To them, these are random objects scattered by wind or accident. To you, they're lifelines connecting you to people who need your help but can't risk being seen asking for it. Your leather coat has been dyed black for better camouflage, and you've padded the inside to muffle any sound your equipment might make. You move through the night like death itself, which is probably more appropriate than you'd like to admit. You've established a secret treatment center in an abandoned church, one that was closed after the priest died of plague, and no replacement could be found. The building sits empty, but not forgotten, and the local families know you can be found there during certain hours. The setup is medieval medicine at its most improvised, with beds made from old pews, storage areas for your limited supplies, and a simple triage system that separates the definitely dying from the possibly savable. Patients arrive through a hidden entrance in the church basement, guided by family members who've learned your secret routes and timing. They come in darkness, seeking help from someone who's been declared unwelcome in the daylight world above. Your treatments haven't improved much, you still can't cure plague, but you've gotten better at managing symptoms and providing comfort. The herb mixtures help with pain, the bloodletting probably does more harm than good, but the presence of someone who cares makes a difference that can't be measured in medical texts. Most importantly, you've become a source of information for families navigating the plague's progression. You can tell them what to expect, how to make their loved ones more comfortable, and when to call for a priest. In a world where uncertainty kills hope, knowledge becomes its own form of medicine. Your secret practice has connected you with others who've been pushed to the margins of society. The gravediggers who work nights, the priests who still perform last rites despite official church prohibitions, the midwives who deliver babies into a world gone mad. Together, you form an invisible support network that keeps the city functioning, even as its official structures collapse under the weight of the crisis. You share resources, information, and most crucially, the psychological burden of trying to help people when help seems impossible. The gravedigger Thomas brings you news from the burial grounds about disease patterns and mortality rates in different neighborhoods. Father Marcus shares information about families who need medical attention but are too afraid to seek it openly. The midwife Catherine tells you which mothers are surviving childbirth and which newborns might need extra care. This informal intelligence network allows you to allocate your limited time and resources more effectively than any official city planning ever could. You know where the disease is spreading, which areas are recovering, and where your intervention might actually save lives. Your leather journal has become a comprehensive database of the plague's impact, not just the official statistics you report to the city council, but the real human cost that official records never capture. For months of plague medicine, and you've developed elaborate rituals to maintain your mental health, because witnessing constant death has effects that no medical training prepares you for. Your morning routine now includes not just preparing your equipment, but preparing your mind for another day of horror. You've learned to separate your professional self from your personal self, creating mental compartments that allow you to function effectively while preserving some core part of your humanity. The plague doctor who enters infected houses is a different person from the one who eats breakfast or writes letters or dreams about better times. Your dreams have become a battlefield where your conscious mind struggles to process the day's trauma without being overwhelmed by it. You dream of successful treatments, of patients who recover, of a world where your arrival brings hope instead of fear. These dreams are usually lies, but they're necessary lies. The herb mixtures you inhale through your beak have evolved beyond simple aromatics, including small amounts of substances that calm your nerves and steady your hands. Nothing dangerous, just enough to take the edge off the constant tension that comes with expecting death around every corner. You've also developed a practice of recording one positive observation each day, something beautiful or hopeful or simply human that you've witnessed. The way sunlight falls through a window onto a patient's face. A child's laughter echoing from a house where recovery is possible. These small notes become anchors that prevent you from drowning in despair. The City Council has begun using your reports to make increasingly desperate decisions about resource allocation. Your recommendations about which neighborhoods to quarantine, which families to prioritize for medical supplies, and which areas to essentially abandon have become matters of life and death for thousands of people. This responsibility weighs on you more heavily than the physical danger or the social isolation. You're no longer just treating individual patients, you're helping to decide the fate of entire communities based on your assessment of their chances for survival. The wealthy districts receive priority, not because their lives are more valuable, but because they have the resources to pay for treatment and the political connections to demand attention. Your reports provide the medical justification for decisions that are fundamentally economic. Meanwhile, the poor quarters are written off as lost causes, receiving only enough attention to prevent them from becoming sources of infection that might spread to more important areas. Your documentation of their suffering serves primarily to demonstrate that the authorities are aware of the problem, not that they're actually solving it. You've become complicit in a system that values some lives over others, and this knowledge follows you through the dark streets like a second shadow. The bird mask hides your face, but it can't hide the weight of choices you never wanted to make. Tonight, as the city sleeps around your secret movements, we leave you mastering the delicate balance between helping individual patients and serving the larger political machine that keeps you alive to help anyone at all. Tomorrow, we'll explore how you handle the moment when your two worlds collide in ways that force you to choose between your calling and your survival. 6 months into your double life as both official plague doctor and underground medical provider, your carefully constructed world collapses on a rainy Thursday morning. You're leaving your secret clinic through the basement entrance when you nearly walk directly into Captain Morrison, the city guard who's been assigned to protect you during official rounds. He's not alone, and 3 other guards stand behind him, their faces grim with the kind of determination that suggests this isn't a social visit. Your mind races through possibilities, wondering how much they know and how much trouble you're in. The captain addresses you with careful formality, explaining that they need to discuss your recent activities. His tone suggests this isn't a request, and the positioning of his men suggests escape isn't an option. Your leather-clad hands remain steady as you adjust your beak, buying precious seconds to think. The abandoned church behind you contains evidence of months of unauthorized medical practice, patients who trust you to keep their secrets, and supplies that you've diverted from official channels. You realize with crystalline clarity that your two worlds, the official plague doctor who serves the city council and the underground healer who serves the desperate, are about to collide in ways that could destroy both versions of yourself. They escort you to the city hall, where the remaining council members wait in what was once the grand chamber, but now serves as crisis management headquarters. Maps cover the walls, marked with colored pins indicating infection rates, quarantine zones, and death tolls that climb daily. Councilman Aldrich, the only original member still alive after 6 months of plague, doesn't waste time with pleasantries. He produces your official medical reports, comparing them with intelligence gathered from your unauthorized activities. Someone has been watching you, documenting your secret practice with the thoroughness of people who understand that information is power in times of crisis. Your official reports indicate 17 house calls this month, yet their sources suggest you've treated nearly 60 patients during the same period. The mathematics of your deception are laid out with bureaucratic precision: patient names, treatment locations, medicine dispensed without authorization. They know about your secret clinic, your network of supporters, your alternative routes through the city. What they don't understand is why you've been doing it, because the official mindset can't comprehend medical care that isn't tied to political objectives or economic calculations, since the idea that you might treat people simply because they need help is foreign to their crisis management philosophy. You realize this confusion might be your salvation if you can frame your unauthorized activities as serving the city's interests rather than undermining them. You remove your mask, which you never do during official meetings because this conversation requires them to see your face, to remember that behind the leather and beak is someone who chose this work for reasons beyond mere survival. You explain that the official patients they assign you represent perhaps 10% of the people who need medical attention, while your unauthorized work serves the other 90%, people whose suffering doesn't make it into their reports. You describe your intelligence network, how information gathered from treating unofficial patients has improved your understanding of the plague's progression, allowed you to predict outbreaks before they become uncontrollable, helped you recommend quarantine measures that actually work because your argument makes uncomfortable sense. Your unauthorized practice has generated intelligence that their official channels missed, prevented outbreaks that would have been far more costly than the medicine you've diverted. But there's also the question of authority and precedent, because if they allow you to operate outside official channels without punishment, other essential workers might begin making independent decisions about resource allocation and crisis management. You're asking them to retroactively authorize 6 months of insubordination based on results that can't be measured in traditional metrics. How do you quantify suffering prevented, or hope maintained, or community trust preserved through small acts of unauthorized compassion? The council members exchange glances, wrestling with the implications of your revelation, because your secret work has been more effective than their official policies, but acknowledging that fact undermines their authority. After hours of deliberation, Councilman Aldrich presents their decision with the weary authority of someone who's made too many impossible choices. You'll be allowed to continue both your official duties and your unauthorized practice, but under new conditions that bring your secret work under official oversight. Your underground clinic will be designated as an emergency treatment center, with city funding for basic supplies, but also with reporting requirements that document every patient, every treatment, every outcome. Your network of information sources will be formalized as an intelligence-gathering operation, transforming your rebellion into another tool of city management. It's survival, but it comes with a cost you hadn't anticipated, because the families who trusted you because you operated outside official channels will now have to trust a system that has consistently prioritized political and economic considerations over their welfare. You agree to the terms because the alternative is execution for insubordination during a time of crisis, but you understand that you've traded some of your medical independence for the security of official recognition. Your secret clinic will receive funding, but it will also receive oversight that might limit its ability to help people the city considers expendable. Your first day operating under the new arrangement feels strange, almost surreal, because the abandoned church is no longer abandoned. It's an official emergency medical facility with city-provided supplies, official record-keeping requirements, and regular inspections. The patients still arrive through the basement entrance, but now they're documented in triplicate, their conditions reported to the same council that previously ignored their existence. Your network of gravediggers and priests and midwives now file official intelligence reports alongside their unofficial communication, which means everyone who helped you survive your underground period is now potentially at risk if the political winds shift again. You've gained resources, legitimacy, and protection from mob violence, but you've also lost the flexibility that allowed you to prioritize pure medical need over political considerations. Every treatment decision now carries implications for city policy, resource allocation, and official statistics. The irony isn't lost on you that your successful rebellion against bureaucratic medicine has been absorbed into the very bureaucracy you were rebelling against. You're still helping people, but now you're helping them according to official guidelines that may or may not align with actual medical need. The herb mixtures you prepare must now follow standardized recipes approved by the city's remaining senior physicians, most of whom have never actually treated a plague patient. Your triage decisions are subject to review by officials who evaluate patients based on their potential contribution to the city's economic recovery rather than their medical prognosis. But perhaps most challenging is the realization that your patients now see you differently, because you're no longer the rogue healer who risked everything to help them in secret. You're an official representative of the same authority structure that has consistently failed them throughout the crisis. Some families still trust you, remembering the nights when you appeared like a dark angel to help their dying children, but others view your new official status with suspicion. They wonder if your treatments will be reported to authorities who might use medical information for purposes beyond healing. Your leather journal, once a private record of human suffering and small acts of compassion, is now an official document subject to government review. The positive observations you recorded to maintain your sanity are now evaluated for their potential political impact rather than their personal meaning. Tonight, as you navigate this strange new world where your calling to heal has been transformed into another instrument of state policy, we leave you grappling with the price of legitimacy. Tomorrow, we'll explore how you adapt to working within a system you once circumvented, and discover whether institutionalized compassion can retain the human heart that made your secret practice so effective. 8 months into your plague doctor career, and you've discovered that official recognition comes with chains made of bureaucracy and good intentions twisted into political tools. Your underground clinic, now designated Emergency Treatment Center Number 3, operates with the efficiency of a government office, which is to say poorly, but with excellent documentation. Every morning begins with paperwork because apparently even during the apocalypse, proper forms must be filed in triplicate. You document patient arrivals, symptom assessments, treatment protocols, and outcomes using standardized language that strips away the human stories behind the medical statistics. Where you once wrote, "A young mother holds her dying infant while singing lullabies in a voice broken by grief," you now record, "Female patient age 22 presents with advanced plague symptoms. Prognosis terminal. Family counseling provided per Protocol 7B." The transformation of personal tragedy into bureaucratic language serves the city's need for organized data, but it slowly erodes your connection to the people you're supposed to be helping. You begin to see patients as cases rather than individuals, which makes the work more manageable but less meaningful. Your herb mixtures, once crafted through intuition and experience, now follow recipes approved by a committee of physicians who've never actually treated plague patients. The standardized formulations are probably more consistent than your improvised blends, but they lack the personal touch that once made your treatments feel like acts of compassion rather than medical procedures. The city provides better supplies than you've ever had: clean bandages, quality herbs, even some rare medicines imported from distant regions where plague hasn't yet arrived. But every bottle and bandage comes with usage restrictions, allocation guidelines, and reporting requirements that limit your ability to respond to individual needs. When a patient desperately needs extra pain medication, you must file a variance request that takes 3 days to process, during which time the patient usually dies. When a family can't afford the city's standardized treatment fees, you must refer them to the charity ward, which is understaffed and overwhelmed. Your network of underground allies, once bound together by shared risk and mutual support, has been transformed into an official intelligence gathering operation. Thomas the Gravedigger now files weekly mortality reports with detailed demographic breakdowns. Father Marcus submits lists of families requesting last rites, cross-referenced with neighborhood plague statistics. Catherine the midwife documents birth complications that might indicate maternal plague infection, providing early warning data for quarantine decisions. The personal relationships that sustained you through the darkest period of the crisis have been institutionalized into professional obligations. You still meet with them, but the conversations are different now, focused on data collection rather than emotional support. The informal sharing of resources and information has been replaced by formal protocols that ensure everything is documented, but nothing feels quite as human. The irony is that your operation has become more effective at gathering intelligence and managing resources, but less effective at providing the kind of compassionate care that originally made your secret practice valuable. You're helping more people in aggregate, but each individual interaction feels more distant and impersonal. Your official status has also changed your relationship with the general population, who no longer see you as a figure of mystery and fear, but as a representative of the same government that has consistently failed to protect them from the plague. Some people appreciate having legitimate access to medical care, even if it comes with bureaucratic complications, but others resent your transformation from rogue healer to official functionary. They preferred you when you operated outside the system, because that suggested someone cared enough about their welfare to break rules on their behalf. Now that you're part of the system, your care feels like an obligation rather than a gift, which changes the emotional dynamic of your patient interactions in ways that are subtle but significant. Families who once greeted your arrival with desperate gratitude now approach you with the weary resignation people reserve for government services. They're grateful for help, but they don't expect miracles, and they don't trust you to prioritize their needs over official policy when the two conflict. This shift in expectations affects your own sense of purpose, because much of your motivation came from the knowledge that you were providing help that wouldn't otherwise be available. Now that help is officially available, your role has changed from heroic healer to competent administrator, which is probably more realistic but certainly less inspiring. The personal journal you once kept as a record of human resilience and compassion has been replaced by official reports that focus on statistical trends rather than individual stories. You no longer write about the way sunlight illuminates a patient's face during recovery, or the sound of children laughing in houses where death has been avoided. Instead, you document treatment efficacy rates, resource utilization patterns, and demographic correlations between plague incidents and socioeconomic status. The shift from storytelling to data analysis serves the city's planning needs, but it also distances you from the emotional connections that once made your work feel meaningful. You're becoming more like the fled physicians you once despised, focused on abstract medical concepts rather than individual human suffering. But perhaps most challenging is the realization that your official position has made you complicit in decisions you once opposed, because your recommendations about resource allocation and patient prioritization now carry the weight of government policy rather than individual medical judgment. When you suggest that a wealthy merchant's family should receive priority treatment because they can afford to pay premium fees, you're no longer making a pragmatic decision about survival. You're implementing official policy that values some lives over others based on economic rather than medical criteria. The families in the poor quarters still receive care at your clinic, but they're processed through a system that treats them as charity cases rather than equal patients. The quality of care isn't necessarily worse, but the attitude surrounding it reinforces social hierarchies that you once tried to circumvent. Your bird mask, once a symbol of mysterious compassion appearing in the darkness, has become a uniform representing official authority, which changes how people react to your presence in ways both subtle and profound. Children no longer see you as a magical creature who appears during times of trouble, but as another adult authority figure who might help or might not, depending on regulations and policies they don't understand. The transformation from mythical healer to bureaucratic functionary is probably inevitable, but it represents a loss of something indefinable that once made your work feel sacred rather than simply professional. As we move toward the end of your plague doctor journey, tonight we leave you grappling with the knowledge that success in saving lives has come at the cost of losing some essential part of what made those lives worth saving. Tomorrow, we'll discover how your story ends, whether the institutional changes you've helped create will outlast the crisis, and what becomes of someone who spent months walking between life and death in service of others. 1 year into your plague doctor career, and something extraordinary begins to happen. The death reports that have defined your daily routine start showing a different pattern: fewer new cases, more recoveries, longer intervals between outbreaks. At first, you don't trust the numbers, because hope has become a dangerous emotion after months of disappointment. But the evidence accumulates slowly, undeniably, like dawn breaking after the longest night in human history. Families who were preparing for death begin planning for futures they thought they'd never see. Children who survived the plague start playing in streets that had been silent for months. The transformation isn't sudden or dramatic because plagues don't end with fanfare. They simply fade away when enough people have either died or developed immunity. But for someone who has spent a year documenting nothing but suffering and loss, the gradual return of normalcy feels like witnessing a miracle. Your bird mask, which once marked you as death's representative, becomes a symbol of survival and endurance. People who feared your approach now wave when they see your distinctive silhouette moving through their neighborhoods. The children who once hid when you passed now run alongside you, begging for stories about the strange creatures you've seen and the brave families you've helped. Your official clinic, Emergency Treatment Center Number 3, begins treating more patients for injuries and illnesses unrelated to plague, which means you're returning to something resembling normal medical practice. The standardized protocols that once felt restrictive now provide structure for rebuilding healthcare systems that had completely collapsed during the crisis. You find yourself treating broken bones from construction accidents because people are rebuilding their homes. Helping with difficult childbirths because families are planning for the future again. Managing infections from minor cuts because people are returning to normal work and normal risks. The transition from plague medicine to general practice requires different skills, but the patient interactions feel more familiar, more like the medicine you studied before the world ended. People come to you with problems that can actually be solved, rather than conditions that can only be managed until death arrives. Your colleague Thomas the Gravedigger reports that his workload has shifted from digging mass graves to individual burials with proper ceremonies and mourning rituals. Father Marcus performs more weddings than funeral rites, as couples who delayed marriage during the plague finally celebrate their unions. Catherine the midwife delivers babies into a world where parents dare to hope their children will survive to adulthood, which changes the entire emotional atmosphere of childbirth from desperate prayer to joyful anticipation. The city council begins discussing plans for economic recovery, rebuilding programs, and new policies designed to prevent future outbreaks. Your recommendations about public health measures, quarantine protocols, and emergency medical services become the foundation for reforms that might protect future generations from experiencing what you've witnessed. But the return to normalcy also brings unexpected challenges, because the community that formed around shared crisis begins to dissolve as people return to their individual lives and concerns. The intense bonds forged by mutual dependence during the plague start to weaken as prosperity and safety reduce the need for cooperation. Your relationship with patients becomes more distant, not because you care less, but because they need you less desperately. The families who once saw you as their only hope for survival now view you as one option among many for their healthcare needs. It's healthier for everyone involved, but you find yourself missing the intensity of purpose that came with being essential for survival. The bureaucratic systems that absorbed your underground medical practice begin to evolve into permanent institutions, with formal training programs for future plague doctors, standardized equipment, and official protocols for responding to medical emergencies. Your improvised solutions become textbook procedures studied by students who will never experience the desperation that inspired them. You're invited to teach at the medical college that reopens as the city recovers, sharing knowledge gained through months of trial and error with young physicians who will hopefully never need to use it. The lectures feel strange, describing experiences that are simultaneously intensely personal and historically significant. Your students listen with fascination and horror as you explain how to maintain sanity while witnessing constant death, how to provide comfort when cure is impossible, how to make life and death decisions with incomplete information and inadequate resources. But you realize that what you're really teaching them isn't medical technique. It's the art of preserving humanity while serving as an instrument of institutional policy. The most important lessons can't be captured in protocols or procedures because they're about maintaining compassion when compassion seems pointless and finding meaning in work that often feels hopeless. The leather coat and bird mask that defined your identity for a year now hang in your study, no longer needed for daily work but preserved as reminders of a time when ordinary people were called upon to do extraordinary things. Sometimes you put them on, not for medical purposes, but to remember who you became during those dark months. The transformation from ordinary physician to plague doctor and back to ordinary physician has changed you in ways that will never fully reverse. You've seen how quickly civilization can collapse, how thin the veneer of normalcy really is, and how much strength people can find when survival depends on it. But you've also seen how communities form around shared crisis, how strangers become family when facing common threats, and how individual acts of compassion can preserve hope even when hope seems irrational. These lessons shape your approach to normal medical practice, making you more patient with frightened families, more creative with limited resources, and more appreciative of simple recoveries. Your secret journal, the one you kept separate from official reports, becomes a historical document that captures the human experience of the plague in ways that statistical records never could. Future historians will study your official reports to understand the medical and political response to the crisis, but they'll read your personal observations to understand how it felt to live through it. The families you helped during the darkest period remain connected to you in ways that go beyond normal doctor-patient relationships. They invite you to weddings and christenings and anniversaries that mark their return to normal life. You become part of their family stories, the mysterious figure who appeared when they needed help most. Children born after the plague grows up hearing tales about the bird doctors who walked through dark streets to help the sick and the dying. To them, you're a character from history like knights or dragons, rather than a living person they might encounter in their daily lives. As the years pass and new crises emerge, you find yourself called upon to advise authorities facing different emergencies, because your experience surviving the plague has given you expertise in maintaining essential services during impossible circumstances. The skills you developed as a plague doctor, the ability to work under extreme stress, to make decisions with incomplete information, and to preserve hope when outcomes seem predetermined, prove useful in contexts far removed from medieval medicine. But tonight, as you settle into the peaceful rhythms of a world that has learned to be grateful for ordinary problems and normal challenges, we leave you with the quiet satisfaction that comes from having survived something that seemed unsurvivable and having helped others do the same. Sleep comes gently now, without the weight of tomorrow's impossible choices or the echo of voices calling for help you couldn't provide. Your dreams are filled with recovery stories, with families reunited, with children who grew up healthy and strong despite the darkness that once threatened to consume everything. Rest well, brave healer, knowing that your willingness to wear the mask and walk into the darkness has helped preserve the light for generations yet to come. The world is safer because people like you exist, people who choose compassion over comfort, service over safety, and hope over despair, even when hope seems like the most dangerous choice of all. May your sleep be peaceful, and your dreams be filled with all the lives you touched, all the suffering you eased, and all the love you helped preserve during humanity's darkest hour. Good night, and thank you for choosing to heal when healing seemed impossible.